You're out. This is my vision now. My sister kicked me out of our family restaurant to push her new ideas. When it all fell apart, she realized the truth. Welcome to my YouTube channel. On this channel, I share stories inspired by fascinating topics from Reddit, all revolving around family, friends, and life itself. Today, we dive into a story where the main character faces a situation that might resonate with many of us, one filled with conflict, change, and deep emotional struggle. Have you ever been in a situation like this before, where family traditions collide with new visions for the future? Stay tuned until the end to see how the character navigates these challenges and overcomes them. And if you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Your support keeps me motivated to keep bringing you more amazing stories. The kitchen was always the heart of our family. I could feel it in my bones, like the steady hum of an old engine running on all cylinders. The scent of simmering spices and fresh herbs, the sizzling sound of oil hitting the pan. It was a melody I had grown up with. My name is Jasper Harlow, and for as long as I can remember, I've been immersed in the world of food. Not just any food, but the food of my family's legacy. Harlow's Table, our restaurant, wasn't just a business. It was a sanctuary, a symbol of everything my grandparents had fought for when they immigrated from Italy to the US in the 1970s. My grandmother, Nana Sofia, founded this place with little more than a family recipe book and an unshakable belief that food had the power to bring people together. She and my grandfather, Luigi, had built the restaurant from the ground up, brick by brick. My parents, William and Evelyn, continued the tradition, and it was my destiny to carry the torch. That's what I thought, anyway. But life has a funny way of making you reconsider your certainties. One evening, my world tilted on its axis. It was the kind of news I'd never expected to hear. Over dinner, my father, with an air of finality, casually dropped the bomb. He and Evelyn had made the decision to retire, and to my complete shock, they announced that the reins of Harlow's Table would be handed over to Camille, my younger sister. I wasn't angry, not at first, but there was a cold knot forming in my stomach as I processed the weight of the news. Camille, who had no formal culinary training, no love for the tradition we held so dear, would take over. Her MBA from Harvard was impressive, sure, but food isn't just numbers and profit margins. It's art, it's history, it's soul. And that's something Camille could never understand, no matter how many business degrees she had stacked up on her wall. At that moment, I knew everything was about to change. I didn't know how, but I could feel it. The first few weeks after Camille took the helm were strange. Everything looked the same, yet felt completely different. Harlow's Table was still standing proudly on its corner. The same familiar brick facade, the same warm glow of yellow light spilling out from the windows at night, the smell of garlic and fresh bread that had always marked our little corner of the world. But in the midst of that comfort, there was an unmistakable feeling of something new, something alien. Camille had already started making waves. New menus, new designs, new ideas, but none of them had anything to do with what my grandparents had built. It was like a stranger had come into the house and redecorated without asking anyone. The bones of the place were still the same, but the soul was different. The familiar, comforting essence of Harlow's Table was being replaced by something slick and impersonal. I watched in disbelief as Camille threw out decades-old recipes, some of them carefully preserved by my grandfather, and swapped them for trendy, Instagram-friendly dishes. Gourmet truffle pizza? Sure, I could almost tolerate that, even if it didn't belong here. Kale Caesar salad? Definitely. But where was the pasta my grandfather had spent years perfecting? Where were the slow-cooked ragu and the rich, hearty sauces that had taken us decades to master? They were gone, replaced by small plates, tempura, and fusion dishes that were as soulless as they were trendy. Harlow's Table had always been about the experience, the warmth, the feeling of walking in and being wrapped in the embrace of something familiar. It was about sitting down to a meal that felt like home, where every bite carried a story. I had spent years working alongside my parents, learning the family recipes, watching my father tirelessly tweak the marinara sauce until it was just right. And now Camille had erased all that with a flick of her wrist. One night, after the dinner rush, I found myself standing at the bar, flipping through the new wine list Camille had put together. The air was heavy with exhaustion, and the usual hum of the restaurant had faded into an uncomfortable silence. My fingers trembled as I flicked through the pages, scanning the new wine offerings. Pinot Noir from a region I couldn't even pronounce? Chardonnay from a vineyard I had never heard of? Camille had removed most of the old labels, the ones my father and I had carefully chosen over the years. Wines that spoke of tradition, of our roots in the vineyard-dense valleys of California. In their place were bottles with slick labels and zero history. Wines that, frankly, didn't fit. They didn't have the warmth or the character of the wines we had served for years. They were cold and trendy, just like the new vision Camille was pushing on the restaurant. But the logic was clear. Camille wasn't trying to destroy the restaurant. She genuinely believed in what she was doing. "It's time to modernize," she had said. That same phrase echoing in my mind like a battle cry. A phrase that was meant to be empowering, meant to be forward-thinking. But what was she really saying? That everything we had built, everything my grandparents had poured their lives into, was outdated? Modernize, she'd said. But the real question was, at what cost? I could feel the frustration gnawing at me. A slow burn that had been simmering in my gut for weeks. Watching Camille change the place I had known my whole life was like watching someone take a butcher's knife to a family heirloom. It wasn't just the food. It was the soul of the place. Everything I loved about this restaurant, about my family's story, was being stripped away to make way for something that was, frankly, hollow. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and watch her rip apart everything my family had built. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into her office. A sleek, minimalist space now, devoid of any of the old photographs or knickknacks that used to make it feel like Harlow's table. The walls were barren, and the sterile white desk was cluttered with mock-ups of the new restaurant logo. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "You're changing everything," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "Everything I've worked for, everything our family built, it's all being erased." She looked up at me, unbothered, flipping through papers as if I were some minor inconvenience. "I'm not changing everything, Jasper. I'm improving it," she said coolly. "Harlow's table isn't stuck in the past. It needs to evolve." Her words felt like a slap in the face, and I felt the heat rising in my chest. Evolve? This place isn't just a restaurant, Camille. It's our legacy. It's family. And you're erasing our history. Her expression softened, but it was a softness that didn't reach her eyes. Family, tradition, those things are important, but they don't pay the bills anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The cold, unfeeling logic of her voice stung, and I felt a tightness in my throat, as if I might choke on the bitter realization that my sister didn't understand what made Harlow's table what it was. It wasn't the trendy dishes. It wasn't the Instagram-ready design. It was the feeling of community, the tradition of breaking bread together. It was the essence of home, a place that made people feel like family the moment they walked in. And in that instant, I knew something unthinkable. My sister wasn't just running a restaurant. She was tearing apart the very heart of our family's story. I stepped back from her desk, the weight of my frustration and sadness threatening to overwhelm me. How could I explain to her that what she was doing was more than just business? That to me, this restaurant was everything? It wasn't just a way to make money. It was the cornerstone of my family's identity, a legacy built over decades. Yet, somehow Camille couldn't see it. She was so focused on the future, on modernizing everything, that she had forgotten the most important thing. Without the past, there was no future. I left her office, the anger still boiling in my veins. But underneath that anger, there was a deep, aching sadness. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what I did, things were slipping away from me, from us. And the more I watched Camille push forward with her plans, the more I realized that there might be nothing I could do to stop it. But one thing was clear. This fight was far from over. Hey, are you finding the story interesting so far? If you are, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can continue the adventure together. The best part is just ahead. The following weeks after Camille's takeover were a blur of meetings, arguments, and changes that made my stomach turn. I couldn't focus anymore. The whirlwind of activity around me seemed like a never-ending cycle of decisions, none of which felt like they had any real heart behind them. Everything was moving so fast. The air in Harlow's table felt thick with tension, like the building itself was struggling to breathe under the weight of it all. Each day, I watched as the place I had poured my soul into slowly transformed into something unrecognizable. The worst part? Camille was everywhere. She had become a force to be reckoned with, and she wasn't doing it alone. She had brought in a new executive chef, someone with a reputation for making bold, modern food. Marcus, a young, cocky guy who had trained in New York at some of the trendiest restaurants. The first time I met him, I could tell immediately we were from different worlds. He looked at me like I was some kind of relic from the past. His eyes said it all. He was trying to be polite, but the sneer on his face was impossible to miss. "Slow food?" he scoffed, as he glanced over the menu I had put together before he arrived. "That's so old-fashioned." I wanted to argue, to tell him how much effort and care had gone into each dish, each technique, but I couldn't. Not with Camille standing there, nodding along to his every word. She was the one in charge now. She had the power to do whatever she wanted, and she wasn't about to listen to the likes of me. It wasn't just the food. It was everything. The decor, the atmosphere, the vibe Camille was going for. She tore down the family photos on the walls, the pictures of Nana Sofia and Luigi, my grandparents, laughing with customers, the pictures of my parents cutting ribbons at the restaurant's grand openings. I had always seen those photos as symbols of the hard work and love that went into this place. Those photos were my family's story, preserved for future generations. But they didn't fit with Camille's vision of the future. One morning, I walked into the restaurant before the lunch rush, hoping to catch a quiet moment. I was going to check on the new menu items, see if anything had changed. But instead, I was greeted by the sight of blank walls. The once vibrant photographs were gone, replaced by what could only be described as generic minimalist art. Abstract shapes, color blocks, the kind of art you see in new age coffee shops, meant to look modern and chic, but totally lacking the warmth and soul that used to make the place feel like home. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. That afternoon, Camille came to me with a decision. Her decision. "The name's changing," she said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "No more Harlow's Table. We're calling it the Modern Fork." I didn't know how much more I could take. My family's restaurant, my history, my identity, all being wiped away in the name of progress. All of the things I had grown up with, all the love, the passion, and the work that had gone into building Harlow's Table seemed to be dismissed in a single sweeping move. To Camille, this was just business. To me, it was everything. I stood there, stunned. The Modern Fork. It sounded like something you'd hear in an expensive, trendy part of town, not the warm, welcoming place that Harlow's Table had always been. The name was a symbol of what Camille wanted to create. Something flashy, something new, something that didn't have the weight of history hanging over it. But that history, it was our family, our past. Everything we had worked for, built together, and struggled to preserve was being erased. I turned to my father, William, who was sitting quietly in the corner of the room, watching everything unfold. The man who had stood beside my mother, beside me, through every challenge we had faced. He didn't argue. He didn't fight for me, for my vision, for the legacy of this restaurant. He just sat there, nodding along with Camille, agreeing with her every word. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him to stand up for something, for us. But I couldn't. He didn't even look like he cared anymore. In that moment, I felt more alone than I ever had. It wasn't just the changes to the restaurant. It wasn't just the food or the decor. It was that my father had silently handed over everything to Camille without so much as a word of resistance. Was this what it had come to? Was I the only one who still cared about what this place stood for? That night, I walked out of the restaurant and didn't look back. The streets outside were cold, the city lights casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I walked aimlessly, trying to clear my head, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. But I couldn't. All I could feel was the weight of Harlow's table slipping away from me, and the sinking feeling that no matter what I did, it would never be the same again. I walked for hours trying to process the emptiness. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking away from my entire identity, my family's identity. But what choice did I have? Camille had already made her decision, and now I had to make mine. The restaurant had been a place of warmth, of love, of community. But now it felt like a hollow shell of what it once was. I didn't know who it was for anymore. Certainly not for me, and certainly not for the generations who had come before. I had worked so hard to protect it, to preserve what Harlow's table meant. But no one else seemed to care. Camille had her vision, and my father had decided it was time for me to step aside. They were ready to move on, to build something new, to leave behind everything that had made Harlow's table special. And so I left. I walked out and didn't look back. It's been 6 months since I walked out of the modern fork. 6 months of trying to figure out who I was, of trying to rebuild a life that didn't revolve around a place that had once been my everything. Harlow's table was no longer mine, and the weight of that loss had been suffocating. I never realized how much of my identity had been tied to that restaurant until it was gone. I had spent years in the kitchen, perfecting recipes, serving customers, and watching my family create memories in that space. Now, all of it had been replaced by something unrecognizable, something that I couldn't even stand to walk into anymore. After I left the modern fork, I found myself working at a small local diner. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what I'd trained for, but it was food. Simple, straightforward food. And for the first time in months, I was making food that mattered, to me at least. There was no pressure to create art on a plate. No one to impress with trendy, over-the-top creations. It was just me, a grill, and a couple of frying pans. No distractions. No new vision to live up to. I could focus on what I loved. Making food that tasted like home. Food that made people feel something when they ate it. The smell of burgers sizzling on the grill. The crisp edges of freshly made fries. The satisfaction of watching someone take their first bite and smile. It was simple, but it was real. It was everything I had been missing. But life has a funny way of coming full circle. Just when I thought I was moving on, the past had a way of catching up with me. One evening, as I sat at the bar after my shift, the place nearly empty, a sudden ring broke the silence. I looked down at my phone. The number was unfamiliar, but I had a sinking feeling I knew who it was. My hand hovered over the screen for a second before I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice more tired than I intended. "It's Marcus," came the voice on the other end. Marcus, the new executive chef at the Modern Fork. "I've made a mess of everything," he said, his voice thick with exhaustion. "Camille, she's lost the plot. People aren't coming back. The restaurant's failing. Can you help us? Can you fix this?" I closed my eyes, leaning back in my chair. It was like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected this. It wasn't that I wanted to hear it, but there was a part of me that couldn't ignore it. Part of me had known it would end like this. Camille had always been determined to modernize, to change everything, but without the foundation of what Harlow's table had been, she was left with a hollow shell, and now it was crashing down around her. I laughed bitterly, the sound raw in my throat. Fix it? After everything she did? After what she's done to my family's legacy? I could hear Marcus on the other end, breathing heavily. He was tired, frustrated, and probably scared. "Jasper, please. You're the only one who can help. You know this place. You know what it means. Camille won't listen to me anymore. She's too deep into this vision, and it's not working." My mind was racing. My gut instinct was to hang up, to walk away for good. But there was another part of me, the part that had always cared about Harlow's table, the part that had fought for it, bled for it, that wouldn't let go. This wasn't just about food. It wasn't about menus or decor or modernity. This was my family's history, the story of where we had come from. And Camille was letting it all slip through her fingers. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my emotions. "I don't know if I can help you, Marcus. I don't know if I can help her." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then, in a quieter voice, Marcus said, Please, you're the only one who understands. You're the one who can bring it back." I exhaled deeply, staring down at the counter in front of me. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go back to that place. But I also knew that if I didn't do something, if I didn't try to salvage what was left, everything my family had worked for would be gone forever. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The next few weeks were a blur. I kept my head down at the diner, focusing on the work, but I couldn't stop thinking about the modern fork. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the sterile, minimalist design. I saw the empty chairs, the cold walls, the lack of life. It wasn't a restaurant anymore. It was a hollow imitation of what it once was. Then one day Camille called. She didn't ask to meet. She didn't try to convince me with fancy words. She just asked if I would help. "I was wrong, Jasper," she said quietly, her voice cracking for the first time since we'd fought. I didn't understand what this place really meant. I thought I could modernize it, but I was only destroying it. It took everything in me not to tear into her, not to tell her everything that had been building up inside me since I'd left. But instead, I just sat there, staring out the window. I could hear the sincerity in her voice. She wasn't the same confident, stubborn person she had been 6 months ago. She was broken just like the restaurant, and she knew it. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "We can do this together, Camille. We can blend the past with the future, but we have to honor what came before." There was a pause on the other end, and for the first time I heard Camille breathe deeply. "You're right. I should have listened to you from the beginning. I was so focused on making everything new, I didn't realize what we had was special." In that moment, I knew this wasn't just about fixing a restaurant. This was about fixing us, about restoring what had been broken between us and between the restaurant and its soul. A few days later, we met at Harlow's table for the first time since everything had gone down. The walls were still bare, but the air felt different. There was a new sense of purpose between us, a quiet agreement that we weren't just trying to revive a business, but rather something deeper, something more meaningful. We started brainstorming. It wasn't just about food. It was about the experience. We would bring back the things that mattered. The family photos would return. The familiar, comforting flavors that had defined Harlow's table would return. But we would also make room for the future, for the creativity that Camille had brought to the table. We could combine the old and the new. The challenge would be in balancing the two, in preserving what made the restaurant ours, while still moving it forward. We could do both, we decided. We just had to find a way to honor our past while embracing the future. And just like that, we began to rebuild Harlow's table. Not just as a restaurant, but as a living, breathing part of our family's legacy. A place where food told our story, where memories were made, where the past and the future could finally coexist. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, disagreements, moments when we thought we wouldn't be able to pull it off. But as the months went by, things started to fall into place. The modern touches that Camille had envisioned blended beautifully with the traditional elements that had made Harlow's table special. We brought back the recipes that had been forgotten and added new twists that complemented the old. And slowly, very slowly, the restaurant began to come back to life. The customers returned. Old faces mixed with new ones. We had found our balance. Felt right again. Final thought. This is more than just a story about a restaurant. It's about family, tradition, the delicate balance between honoring what we've been given and having the courage to evolve. For a long time, I thought I had to choose between them. But I've learned we don't have to choose. We just need to find a way to make both work. So, what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or even any feedback you might have. Drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoyed the journey. I promise there's more to come and you definitely won't want to miss it. Thank you for sticking with me through this story. I truly appreciate every one of you who took the time to listen. Until next time, take care and stay tuned for the next chapter.